So a lot to get through in this chapter, so I'm going to go quite fast. This was when Reverend Isaac and came to the very first session and we were talking with him. My question to him was, how can you go back to the Bible? How can you read the Psalms? Because I felt they were kind of lost to me, because they so often end with invocations to Zion, invocations to wiping out enemies. So the questions for me reading this are, what's the point of faith? Where is God? And is there anything at all to learn as people of faith from what is happening in Gaza? And I'm taking rather a different approach to this. So this chapter is whereas some of the other chapters have gone through the history and there are kind of facts to summarize, this is more, I think, a kind of meditation on what is happening, and it's a meditation about meaning. And there are kind of recurrent themes. So I'm taking it with themes, really. So he actually starts with October the 20th, and the event linked to the bombing of the Al-Ahli hospital that directly affected his community, because there were 20 people sheltering in the church hall for St. Porphyrius, and I've deliberately included a picture of the beautiful interior of that ancient church, were massacred, and this hit them very, very hard in Bethlehem as fellow Christians, and also he knew a family who had been affected by this. And he features the story of Nuha, a woman, elderly woman, who has been trying to visit her elderly sister, and many of her family members died in this massacre, very early massacre. And I think one of the very powerful quotes was, "We were baptized here and we will die here." So what Pastor Isaac does in this chapter is to kind of interrogate the meaning of key sacred festivals, Christmas and Easter. And he has a very moving meditation on the Christmas story being a very Palestinian story. And this is Christmas in Palestine today. The Christmas message is not Santa, trees, gifts, and lights. They send us bombs while celebrating Christmas in their land. They sing about the Prince of Peace while beating the drums of war. Now, what I've done is to go through and look at how I've looked at art images that we interpret, we see the Christian story through the lens of cultural icons and images, that some of which are very important to me in terms of faith. And I wanted to look at those in a kind of new way through Pastor Isaac's eyes. And so I've taken elements and seen how they are. And in this mosaic from a church in Istanbul, it's a very dramatic picture of the census. And he says, of course, he reminds us that actually Palestine was under occupation when Jesus was born, and that the vocabulary is census, control, empire, occupation, Caesar, Herod, refugees, pain, exhaustion, and massacred children. And again, it's not trees, lights, gifts, and Santa. And I found that very powerful. This is a Palestinian artist. The picture at the bottom is a tapestry from the Church of St. Porphyrius, which an old tapestry, beautiful tapestry of the Nativity, which was found in that state in the rubble. But looking back, I was reminded of this Botticelli Nativity, which shows the stable not as this kind of very pretty, comfortable place with lovely clean straw, but as a wrecked building. And I think artists who seen deeply into the Christmas story have seen those elements and sometimes portrayed them. I'm looking at Rembrandt's drawing of the flight into Egypt of this exhausted mother, and I don't know if you can see it, but Joseph leading the donkey is also exhausted, and this is exactly what we see in refugees fleeing. And I'm saying this I think Rembrandt, it's not a pretty picture at all. It's it's a powerful image. The Massacre of the Innocents is, of course, a story that recurs. And again, this is Bruegel's picture. And as you know, if you look at Bruegel pictures, they start off, you start from a distance and they look very beautiful. And then you hone in and you see the horrifying things that are happening. And what Bruegel has depicted is precisely what we're seeing. And of course, what we see in massacres of children everywhere in the world. This isn't unique, but it is a Palestine story. Now, the headline in the Washington Post, there was a lot about, oh, well, Christmas is ruined in Bethlehem. It's cancelled in Bethlehem. And I think he talks so powerfully about Christmas cannot be cancelled. Christmas is never cancelled. Christmas is in our hearts, and this is the meaning of Christmas. And then it came to Easter, and I was privileged to hear Pastor Isaac, and when he was at the church in February 2024, when he preached in London, and it was really such a powerful experience for me. That is St. Porphyrius still kind of there amidst the rubble, worshippers in Jerusalem carrying a cross past soldiers, just as the same thing happened with Christ's crucifixion. There's a very moving story that he quotes of a child being pulled from the rubble saying, "I am thirsty." And he is reminded of Christ on the cross. This is a Palestinian artist's version of the crucifixion. Very beautiful and disturbing. I found, I think it was on Middle East somewhere, and I was kind of quite relieved because I was a bit worried about this using beautiful art images. But this Australian author had the same thoughts as myself, and this is the picture that he showed, which reminded him of the Pietites. The Pietà is very kind of it's sort of very clean, isn't it? But it's nonetheless a picture of suffering. This is the image. So I don't know if anybody knows the paintings of Rogier van der Weyden. He was known as a great painter of grief. There are 2 or 3 of his paintings in the National Gallery. And I thought, juxtaposed with this prize-winning photograph, I think it won Times Photo of the Year. And in some ways, I think it's an obscene photograph because the aesthetics of it are so beautiful. But you don't see her face. And the photographer has, if you like, picked out the aesthetic beauty of it, which is very similar to the aesthetics of van der Weyden's painting, except that when you look at van der Weyden, you know that he understands grief. You know that he has seen mothers at the gallows where their sons are hanging. That collapse, that pallor in that woman's face, Mary's face here is like that of the woman in the picture before, and the woman overcome with grief. I think it raises troubling images about questions about art and aesthetics, which maybe we can talk about in the discussion. Pastor Isaac was attacked ludicrously by Zionists saying, "Why didn't you have a child in an Israeli flag?" And he explains why he didn't. And some sort of, oh, well, it's anti-Semitic and it's testament to supporting Hamas to wrap the child in a keffiyeh. Look how smug and fat this man. So I'm sorry, I shouldn't talk like that about fellow Christians. I take that back, but there is something smug about this, and particularly how they dare to lecture him and go, well, Jesus Christ wasn't born in Gaza. You're telling the pastor of Bethlehem this, really? And the point that he makes, which is really an interesting one, I think, is how comfortable we've become in the West with Christ as a westernized figure. And the church being the very church where he worships, it was built with sponsorship from the German Empire and the stained glass pictures of a German blonde, blue-eyed Jesus. But as soon as you feature Jesus as a Palestinian, oh, well, then, you're going into all kinds of territory that is not acceptable, because of course Jesus is white. And I'd known that, but it was very powerful to hear it. I'm just going to read, going back to the Psalms, just a couple of things that Pastor Montrizek says in the book. My God, why did you forsake Gaza? How long will you forget her completely? Why do you hide your face from her? In the daytime I call upon you, but you do not answer. By night we have no rest. Do not depart from the people of Gaza. So that crying out, that lamentation, and the way that he kind of reframes some of that, I was very grateful for, because he allows us to reclaim the Psalms as our own. He says they don't belong to any other people. We make them our own. And I found that very helpful. He asked, where is God? I'm sorry, I'm going on slightly longer than my 10 minutes, inevitably. So he quotes Jonathan Sachs about how Holocaust survivors asked the same question about where is God, and said that God was with the sufferers. And you probably all know this terrible story from Auschwitz of 3 prisoners who were hanged, one of whom was a child, and even the German officers who were supposed to be hanging this little boy, some of them refused to do it, and he took a long time to die. And somebody who they were forced to watch said, where is God? And the voice came, he's on the gallows with the child. And I thought, this is where God is. God is with that little girl, Ward Al-Khalili, I think, going through the fire. And she survived remarkably and is being looked after by her uncle. But that's the same. And I know that Jewish people of real faith recognize that. That's where God is there, precisely there. God has chosen to identify himself as a human corpse. This was an amazing Hans Holbein picture, which again shows how artists were not afraid to confront the reality of death and the reality of starvation and what Christ's body would have looked like. He talks very movingly then about, the meaning of our faith, and how he says Jesus, instead of being another countless forgotten victim, Jesus was remembered, and his story is told and retold for centuries to come. And his solidarity with all forgotten victims enables them to be remembered too. And we haven't got time to look, but I hope you will follow the links. I hope everybody watched the extracts from the Choose Love action in Westminster Abbey last week or the week before, where they took 18 hours to read the names of every child they knew of who died. And of course, we can now add hundreds more. And a project called Stitch Their Names Together, 30,000 names embroidered on panels. A project that was started, my daughter completed one of these. The children's names are in green, the women in red, the men in black. We have a sacred duty to remember and celebrate all of those names. And my story being retold and retold, we retell and retell that story. Somebody said, another quote of a doctor saying, the ones who are left will get to tell the story, but we who are witnesses also have to tell it. I'm going to end just by reading what he says about the tomb. I hope that's okay. He says, we cannot see Sunday. It seems an impossibility. We are swallowed by the darkness of the tomb. It is so hard to speak of the resurrection now. We are mourning and our siblings are dying from starvation, but we cannot lose our faith in God. This is our last resort. We have to look at the empty tomb. We must remember the empty tomb. Because we have faith, we do not live in despair. Because we have faith, we will not accept the prevalence of darkness, but fight evil with good. Faith is the only thing they cannot take away from us. The resurrection urges us to rise and act because we know that the final word belongs to God. We rise and act. We build. We preach life because we know life wins. We preach love because we know love wins. We preach peace because peace wins. Jesus stared death in the face and defeated it, and therefore we rise and act. The followers of Jesus risk all to speak to power. This is not about making a statement. Jesus did not say, I was hungry and you prayed for me. Jesus said, I was a prisoner and you came to me. We must find ways to make a difference. We must act, pressure, lobby, hold powers and leaders accountable, mobilize. We must live as people of the resurrection. Al-Mashiach, Christ is risen. Amen. Thank you all very much.
Wow, you said it was emotional, and it definitely is. Thank you very much. It was disturbing and moving and very good.
Thank you.
James and then Mary. Hi, James. Are you there?
Oh, yeah. I wanted to thank you, Nicola. That was, you couldn't have been more on target. And that's the reality of American Christianity. You know, the Zionist aspect poisons the true tenets of Christ, and they embrace them. And that was a conversation that I had with my wife last night. Sorry, because she's still one of those people that supports both sides, and you can't do that. You you can't justify killing women and children that are unarmed. Anybody that does is reprehensible. So how they can correlate and conflate that type of Christianity to the faith that I've seen Palestinians like Munther have, it, it's insane, and the world has no place for it. That's extremism. You know, America has always been about, you know, we don't support terrorism. We don't negotiate with terrorists. Well, of course we don't. We are the terrorists. We don't negotiate with anyone. We bulldoze you if you say anything. So I wanted to commend you that out of all of the presentations, and that's not taking away from any of the presenters, that one really hit home for me. So I want to thank you.
Well, I think it's Munter. So it's like he seems to condense into that chapter. He pours all of his pain and despair, and it just comes across so powerfully, doesn't it?
Well, I want to say one more thing. I compared Munther with his approach to Christianity in a similar way to what Hassan Kanafani did, as far as his peaceful protest and resistance that got him killed. So
Yeah.
I think that the heart of that resistance and the heart of that love is similar in both men.
Yeah.